Hi, my name is Allan Caine, and I'm a maker. I'm a maker of clocks, and I'd like to invite you to come out to the Maker Expo. It's going to be at the Kitchener City Hall this Saturday, September the 19th, and you can come and see my clocks. This is only 3 of the clocks that I have. I have 7 to show, and I have 2 in progress to be worked on. This clock here is by far my favorite. It's produced by a company called PV Electronics in England, and a very reliable shipper, and he can get these kits to you. This one uses Nixie tubes. It also has, which is very unique, it has a GPS receiver connected to it. It pulls the time off the satellites, and then using the the offset from Greenwich Mean Time computes the actual time for your local time zone. So this clock, of all of the 3, is the most accurate of all. It will always refresh itself. You can fiddle with the time, and then when you turn it back on, it will reset itself to the correct time. This is a relatively easy one to put together, despite its look of complexity. Some of the surface mount parts, which is tricky soldering, has been done for you. Basically, it's just the through-hole soldering that you have to do, and also the individual Nixie tubes, which is Russian new old stock. They sit on pins, and the nice thing about that is that you can then, if these ever burn out, you can just pull them off and then put another tube in its place. It's a nice nostalgic combination of the old, which is the Nixie tubes, which are not commonly found anymore, with the new, the LEDs, which show the colons and the changing in the light. I really, really like this one. This one here also has Nixie tubes. It's from a maker in Russia, and this is a new old stock. These particular tubes were probably intended to show levels of some kind. The ingenuity used here is to take 4 of them and put them side by side to create a dot matrix display. And I have the transition on auto, so as the minutes change, the screen will change. So this is the hours, this is the minutes, and these are more traditional type of, they are Nixie tubes actually. It's not a 7-segment display like we see today with LEDs. And again, this particular clock can be a bit challenging to put together. It wouldn't be something that I would suggest for someone who's just learning how to solder. It can be quite a bit of work, but it's certainly a really, really wonderful, it's a wonderful start. If you're looking at something you're not familiar with soldering, and you're just getting into the making of kits, this is the bulb dial clock. It's made by the Evil Mad Scientist, and these are very easy to find on the web, and they're not very expensive. It's LEDs in rings. There's a ring of blue, which represents the second, a ring of green representing the minutes, and a ring of red showing the hours. And the idea is that they cast a shadow on a pin in the middle. Admittedly, the shadow is kind of a bit hard to see at times, but the idea is that this is very, very easy to put together. Nixie tubes have to be driven at a very high voltage. LEDs, on the other hand, can be driven at very low voltages, so you don't have the complications of a complicated power plant. And it's an ingenious design, and on the web, very great instructions and sort of time-lapse pictures showing what the kit looks like at each stage in the development process. So definitely a great starter clock. It's the Evil Mad Scientist, the bulb dial clock. I would recommend it highly to anyone. Ever since I was a youngster, I've always been interested in clocks. I wanted to learn more about electronics, and how it works. As a software developer, I'm usually many layers of abstraction away from the hardware. And this was a good way to understand more about hardware and also produce something that is really lovely and something very interesting. And so I started making these kits that I purchased from various sources. And I just love the hobby, and I've learned how to solder and learned how some basic electronics and how electronics work. In making these clocks, I found a number of interesting things. I suppose one thing is the story behind the Nixie tubes. This clock has Nixie tubes. This clock has Nixie tubes. And I didn't realize that there is this world supply, but a limited one, of Nixie tubes that were made during the Soviet Union time. And they were producing these Nixie tubes long after the world had moved on to doing other things. And so this is kind of a nice blend of old and new. This one here has the Nixie tube showing the time, but it also has modern LEDs lighting up the background display. So there's kind of a nostalgia of the way things used to be done, together with new technology, which is actually the one that it has a new technology, say that's the power plant that is driving these Nixie tubes at a very high voltage. That's one thing I learned. I've learned a lot about different kinds of components. I've always known what a resistor is, but you know, capacitors, the difference between a capacitor and a fuse, which are confusingly similar. There are just so many things that you can learn through this process, and unexpected discoveries. And so I invite anybody who's interested in electronics but you just want to get your foot in the door, go buy a kit and put the kit together. And if you're not into clocks, well, there's kits for all kinds of other things. Do that instead. Put a radio kit together, anything that you like, but it's a really fulfilling hobby. The advice I would give myself if I had to go back into the past is get started sooner, because it's such a wonderful hobby, and I don't know why I wasn't involved in this making movement and doing electronics much sooner. Not only do I do the clocks, but I'm also heavily involved in the Arduino, which I love, and making circuits and very simple things. So I guess if I went back in the past, I'd be saying you should have started sooner. For me, the thing that was holding me back is, did I really have the competence to do this? Did I know how to solder? Well, it turns out that there are places that you can go to learn how to solder, and it turns out it's not as difficult as you might imagine. And there are tons of books and online guides that you can get. So there's I guess it was for me a fear element that, would I really be able to do it? I mean, I'm a software developer. I'm not really a hardware kind of guy. But having done these things, now I understand it, and it just opens up a world of knowledge that wasn't there before. So that was what it is for me. And I think that if I gave advice to anybody, I'd say, put your fears aside and maybe just dive in. How bad can it be? Well, I read the story about Ahmed and the police investigation and his arrest, and I think that it's important to keep some perspective on that situation, that it's probably very singular, and it shouldn't be used, people should not fear doing electronics and making. Prior to being a software developer, I was an accountant working for a school board, so I have some frame of reference there. And reading through it and thinking about my days there and how things work at school boards and how the school board officials reacted, they showed a remarkable lack of good judgment. in dealing with the situation. What was the likelihood that a 14-year-old has built a bomb, even if you think it looks like a bomb? And if you think it looks like a bomb, why would you actually go to the point of arresting the individual? What was your cause for doing that? So it sounds to me like it was just a complete and long list of errors that were made in judgment. So I would say to people, I mean, my sympathy is with Ahmed. It must have been a traumatic experience, but others should not take this and say, well, this is the general case. Go ahead, make your clocks, make your radios, make whatever electronics you were going to. It's unlikely that most reasonable people will mistake it for a bomb. The things I hope people will take away from Maker Expo is that there's some really exciting things that you can do. In your spare time, you can build up hobbies. One of the things I think of now is there's lots of complaints about how much screen time people have. You know, they spend too much time on the internet, too much time on this and too much time on that, just time wasting activities. But here's a great way to have a hobby, get you away from the screen time, and then you build just marvelous products. You have something to show for yourself, and you can be really proud of the work that you've done. I'm also a software developer. I'm a job seeker. I'm just starting a job search, and I have a great background in Java. I have a great background in C++. I was working on cell phones, but I have a great interest in all areas, and I would love to have a conversation with prospective employers. I can be reached at adcaine@gmail.com, and I would be pleased to share with you my resume so that we can have a conversation to see how my skills and talents and experience can help you as an employer to further your business objectives so that we can both win together in this space.